Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Joshua Barnes, live from the Firstpost studios. First, let's take a look at the headlines. US President Donald Trump signs a bill to end the 43-day-long government shutdown, the longest in the country's history. The Bangladeshi court will pronounce the verdict in the crimes against humanity trial of ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina on November the 17th. This according to the country's chief prosecutor. Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan appoints the country's former finance minister Mwigulu Nchemba as the Prime Minister, following her landslide victory in the October 29th election that sparked deadly protests. Spain orders nationwide poultry confinement measures to counter the heightened risk of bird flu following numerous outbreaks across Europe. Nationwide confinement measures are also in place in the UK and France. And host Pakistan shifts the Tri-Nation 2020 International Series with Sri Lanka and Zimbabwe entirely to Rawalpindi after a suicide bombing attack in Islamabad. Hello and welcome. Today we begin our show with the African Union siding with Nigeria over US President Donald Trump's genocide claim. Days after the remarks were made, the regional bloc has come out in support of Nigeria and has rejected the Republican leader's claim. The group's chairperson said there is no genocide in northern Nigeria. He even cautioned that one should think twice before making such comments.
There is no genocide in northern Nigeria. I think the complexity of the situation in northern Nigeria should, push us think twice before declaring such or making such statements. The first victims of Boko Haram are Muslims, not Christians. The first victims, and I'm saying it with documented references. So the complexity in the northern part of Nigeria should not be taken, that easily.
Nigeria reels under terror attacks linked to the Boko Haram group. The violence has killed tens of thousands of people over the past 15 years. However, human rights experts have said that most Boko Haram victims have been Muslims. The Nigerian government has vowed to fight terrorism and engage with the world diplomatically. The country's president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has rejected Trump's claim and reaffirmed that the country's constitution guarantees religious freedom.
The task ahead is immense. We are engaging the world diplomatically, and we assure all of you that we will, defeat terrorism in this country.
Tinubu's affirmation to fight terrorism in the country followed Trump's grave accusations. Earlier this month, he said that Christians are being killed in Nigeria in large numbers. He asked the Defense Department to prepare for possible fast military action if Nigeria fails to stop the killings. He also threatened to stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria.
If the Nigerian government continues to allow the killing of Christians, the USA will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria. We're going to do things to Nigeria that Nigeria is not going to be happy about, and may very well go into that now disgraced country, guns a-blazing, to completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible, horrible atrocities.
And Trump also warned the Nigerian government to take quick action, adding, and I quote, "The Nigerian government better move fast before it's too late. If they don't, there's going to be hell to pay." Trump's warning came after his administration added Nigeria to the countries of particular concern list over its alleged religious freedom violations. Other nations on that list include China, Myanmar, North Korea, Russia and Pakistan. Nigeria has 200 ethnic groups practicing Christianity, Islam and other traditional religions. The country has a long history of peaceful coexistence. However, it has also seen flare-ups of violence among groups. These clashes are often aggravated due to ethnic divisions or conflicts over limited resources and add to the violence in the country, which stems from the growing insurgency in northern Nigeria. And for more on this story, we have with us Chris Kwaja, who is a political analyst from Nigeria. Thank you for joining us, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Let's first look at the significance of this show of support from the African Union. What does it mean?
The African Union typifies what you have in Europe, like the European Union, and typical of such organizations or unions. The member states of these unions are driven by the principle of collective security, which means they are bounded by a collective security agenda. And from the perspective of the African Union, any foreign intervention into Africa is one that, again, will impact on the sovereignty of member states of the African Union. And that's the perspective with which the African Union is engaging the Trump issue. So sovereignty is the focus, the solidarity or the show of support that the African Union is giving to Nigeria is born out of that protection and respect of the sovereignty of the Nigerian state, and by extension, the Africa as a continent in general. But that is not to say that across Africa there are no cases of mass atrocities where many member states of the African Union have shown increased inability to contain or contend with rising insecurity that are transnational in nature. They are not just localized to the specific member states of the African Union, but they have transnational character. For instance, Nigeria, Cameroon, Niger are all affected or impacted by the situation we see in the Lake Chad with respect to the activities of Boko Haram. So that's what we see with the African Union.
Yes. And looking back at Trump's Christian killing statements, could this continental unity potentially backfire for Africa, given that it is such a contentious topic and one Trump has spoken about multiple times?
Africa is a very unique country in terms of its makeup. It is a very diverse continent. We have Christians, we have Muslims, we have other religious groups. So at the heart of its search for the management of diversity is the whole question of identity, and religion is one of such. It is easy for people to mobilize, to instrumentalize or weaponize religion. We've seen, for instance, cases where communities that are largely Muslims in the northwest and the northeast were killed by members of Boko Haram or the bandits that are also Muslims. We've seen communities that are almost 100% Christians within Benue and Plateau also attacked or killed by suspected bandits that are believed to be Muslims. So at whatever level, even if we don't look at genocide, we are talking about mass atrocities. Mass atrocities in the context of how defenseless communities are attacked, killed, maimed, displaced, their livelihood destroyed by organized criminal groups. And the focus is that regardless of who is killed, Nigerian citizens are killed. The Nigerian state has a primary responsibility of protecting lives and property. But for the victims of this insurgency or banditry or organized crime, and people or communities or groups who speak for these communities, the intensity of what they see in terms of the huge humanitarian crisis that follow up these attacks created the conditions for this level of genocide, because they see a whole community of one ethnic group or one religious group being attacked by suspected criminals from the other religious group. And typical of Trump, for instance, whose election, again, was made possible by the role that the evangelical Christians played in the US, they also have interest, not just in Nigeria, but other religious groups across the world when it comes to how these religions that they also are part of are affected by either governance or the activities of criminal groups, just like we see in Nigeria.
And Chris, finally, of course, Donald Trump has made these threats. He's called for a plan for quick action, potentially in Nigeria. What would US military action in Africa mean for the relationships between African nations and the US? This, of course, amid growing cooperation in the continent with both Russia and China.
It is clear that there are two trends that will impact on a possible US military action in Nigeria. The first is geostrategic, looking at the role of China in Africa, and China sees the United States as a competitor in Africa. By allowing a military intervention by the United States, it means the United States will contest or contend with China, and China sees itself as the most visible actor in Africa right now. The second is that what will be the implication of a military intervention? There are two sides to that story. The first is that people look at Afghanistan, Libya, and Pakistan and other countries where military interventions have occurred. And the question they are asking is, what has been the story of US-led military intervention in those countries? The second group is saying the Nigerian state has shown quite clearly that it is unable to deal with the rising cases of insecurity in the country. And it should be humble enough to request for military assistance from countries that are willing to help, like the United States. My point is that while we allow for a military intervention in Nigeria, I think the focus should be more diplomatic, in the sense that US military assistance should come to Nigeria through assistance. The Nigerian government should be able to clearly state the areas of need, and this support should be given to the Nigerian government for the Nigerian government to address the rising security challenges that it confronts. I don't, as an individual, support a direct military intervention in the context of what we saw in Afghanistan or Libya, but supporting Nigeria through equipment provisioning and other logistical support like IC technology will be a major force multiplier in addressing this issue with proper monitoring. Because we've seen also that within the military, there has been cases of collusion of moles within the military, the Nigerian military providing intelligence to these criminal groups. And that has made it difficult for the Nigerian military to effectively contain the activities of criminals and other insurgent groups in the country.
Chris, thank you ever so much for your time and for joining us on the programme.
Thank you very much.
Let's now shift focus to South Africa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa has said that the US boycott of the G20 summit, which is scheduled to take place in the country later this month, is their loss. He added that the US absence would not prevent the meeting from going ahead. He said that the United States is giving up a very important role that it should be playing as the world's biggest economy.
All I can say in my experience in politics is that boycotts never really work. They have a very contradictory effect. The United States, by not being at the G20, one must never think that we are not going to go on with the G20. The G20 will go on. All other heads of state will be. In the end, we will take fundamental decisions, and their absence is their loss.
South Africa is set to host the G20 summit on November the 22nd and 23rd. This will be the first time the group will convene on African soil. The 19-member bloc represents 85% of the world's GDP and about two-thirds of its population. South Africa says it wants to use its G20 presidency to champion global South priorities. But why is the US, which is also a member of the group, skipping this meeting? That's because US President Donald Trump alleges that white South Africans are being systematically killed and slaughtered, and their land and farms are being illegally confiscated in South Africa. Trump, on his Truth Social network, said it is a total disgrace that the G20 will be held in South Africa. Earlier, he had announced that Vice President J.D. Vance would attend the meeting instead of him. But now he has said that no US government official will attend the meeting at all, as long as the alleged human rights abuse continue in South Africa. The Trump administration has also labelled South Africa's theme of solidarity, equality and sustainability as anti-American.
For generations, Miami has been a haven for those fleeing communist tyranny in South Africa. I mean, if you take a look at what's going on in parts of South Africa, look at South Africa, what's going on. Look at South America, what's going on. You know, I'm not going to, we have a G20 meeting in South Africa. South Africa shouldn't even be in the Gs anymore, because what's happened there is bad. I'm not going. I told him I'm not going. I'm not going to represent our country there. It shouldn't be there.
Trump also made these human rights abuse claims during Ramaphosa's US visit in May earlier this year. At the Oval Office, Trump played a video which showed a false campaign against white farmers by the post-apartheid government. South Africa has denied these claims. South Africa is set to hand the baton of G20 presidency to the US next. The Trump administration would host the 2026 G20 summit, and the billionaire US president has set a rather unconventional venue for that meeting. He said that he will hold the summit at his own golf resort in Miami. Moving on, Russia is moving closer to the African continent as military and diplomatic connections reach a new milestone. Russian state exports of defense products have hit the $4 billion milestone to the continent, specifically relating to Russia's state-owned arms company, Rosaboron Exports. Their CEO has said the company has entered into $4 billion worth of military-industrial contracts with 46 separate African nations. Just to put that into context, there are 54 fully recognized countries in Africa. The Russian firm has been a major player in the global arms trade for some time, and the African market is one that is opening up, with governments looking to modernize their military capabilities. And the company have made their presence felt on African soil. The company was one of the main exhibitors at the African Aerospace and Defense event, the continent's largest defense and aviation exhibition. Held in Pretoria, South Africa last June, Rosaboron Exports displayed a host of Russian-made assets. But why are African nations turning to Moscow? Well, there is first a clear anti-West sentiment coming from large parts of the continent. Former colonial rule of France has lost influence in many West and Central African countries. African governments have dismantled French military bases, creating opportunities for new military partnerships. Most notably are those in the Sahel region, including Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, who have completely rejected Western influences. And in Africa currently, wars are raging across the continent. The Sahel War, which has intensified in recent times, with the previously mentioned Mali, Nigeria and Burkina Faso governments all fighting various armed groups. In East Africa, the Sudanese civil war has seen intense fighting since April of 2023, with Russia providing arms to the Sudanese army in their fight against the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. And the Central African Republic has engaged in significant weapons deals with Russia since 2017 amid fighting with armed groups and the government forces. Fighting in Somalia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Mozambique and South Sudan is also ongoing. This among other regional conflicts. In the period between 2018 and 2022, Russia was already Africa's largest arms supplier, with roughly 40% of exports coming from Moscow. And now, with further cooperation in the sector, Russia's influence across much of the continent is set to continue its surge. Once under Western colonial rule and then the lingering influence, Africa is now forging its own partnerships. And it seems Russia is the first choice for most. And our final story comes from the West African nation of Mali, where a TikTok influencer was publicly executed. The victim, identified as Mariam Cisse, was abducted on Friday from a market in the town of Tonka, about 144 kilometers from Timbuktu. She was later brought back to the town's Independence Square and shot dead in front of a crowd. No one has claimed responsibility for the influencer's execution. However, the Al-Qaeda-linked JNIM group is known to patrol Tonka, the town where she was abducted. Reports suggest that she had received death threats before her killing. Cisse was in her 20s and had more than 100,000 followers on TikTok. She often posted videos wearing combat-style clothing, expressing support for Mali's armed forces. At an event, Mali's Prime Minister, General Abdoulaye Maïga, paid tribute to Mariam Cisse and condemned the attack. He called it an assault on the nation and its people. Let's listen in.
This occasion is both a fitting and sorrowful for us, as we take a moment to remember Miss Mariam Cisse, who was cowardly murdered by terrorist groups simply because she expressed her support for her country and its army. May Allah welcome her into paradise, and may Allah also grant paradise to all victims of insecurity and terrorism.
The West African nation has been caught in a cycle of conflict since 2012, after Tuareg separatists launched an armed rebellion in the country's north. Groups linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State later overtook the rebellion. After two back-to-back coups in 2020 and 2021, the Malian military seized power, removing the elected government and forming a junta. The junta expelled French and UN troops and sought Russia's support. Despite the army's attempts to restore stability, the JNIM has increased its control across several regions, blocking trade routes, impacting hospital operations, fuel and food supplies as well, and forcing the government to shut down schools, which are now reopening gradually. The African Union issued a statement last week, expressing deep concern over the deteriorating security situation in Mali and urging international coordination to handle the situation. Experts fear that the current regime is likely to collapse within weeks or months. France, the United States, Germany and Italy advised their citizens to leave Mali at the earliest convenience, citing growing risks in areas around the capital, Bamako. Meanwhile, Maïga accused France and Algeria of supporting terror groups. He also rejected predictions of the country's collapse.
Today, those on the side of the terrorist groups operating in our region are the French junta and the Algerian junta. Some detractors hoped to see Mali collapse. They wanted to see the Malian people on their knees, divided and weakened. Mali will not fall. Mali will not sink, because Mali is, above all, its people and its ideals.
Cisse's death follows a recent rise in kidnappings, including the abduction of foreign workers in Western Mali. These incidents underline the erosion of state control and worsening security crises in the country. That's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, thank you for watching.